Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Garden Hour, brought to you by SDSU Extension every week at this hour. I'm Rhoda Burrows, SDSU Extension Horticulturist, and I'm going to be your host tonight. With us tonight, we have Laura Edwards, SDSU Climatologist, and I suppose you're going to be talking about the end of summer and the beginning of fall.
Yep, that's right.
We also have with us tonight Paul Johnson, SDSU Extension Weed Specialist. And Paul, what are you going to be talking about tonight?
Well, we're going to be talking about some fall weed control for our lawn areas and some of the weeds that maybe work the best and how we can set up for doing that fall spraying.
All right. And again, we will have Christina Lind, our horticulture outreach consultant for McCrory Gardens, to bring us those beautiful flowers from McCrory Gardens. With that, Laura, take it away.
Okay. Thank you, Rhoda, for that introduction. I think I'm ready to go. All right. So thanks everyone for joining us this evening. I'm going to keep it kind of simple tonight. And if you have other questions, I can still share screen and find things online if you need, or help answer questions on the fly. But for tonight, as Rhoda said, kind of talking about the fall season, end of growing season. Now is a time where we get a lot of questions about fall frost and looking ahead towards winter and what that might look like. So I'll kind of start there with fall frost. So this data is a little older. We do have some new frost date information that was just published by NOAA, N-O-A-A, in May of this year, but we haven't been able to compile all that just yet. But when I looked at a few locations, the dates for fall frost haven't changed too much. If anything, they're a day or so later in the season as compared to this data here. So this is the 50th percentile, or the median date for the first fall frost of 32 degrees. And it doesn't take into account how long at that temperature. So it could just dip down to 32 quick and come right back up, whatever the minimum of the day was. So you can look around the state here and kind of see where you're at. I know you guys and gals are all from everywhere. But typically you could see the higher elevations of the Black Hills kind of stick out. They tend to freeze earlier than the rest of us. The latest dates are around first week or so of October, down in the southeast, southeast, and also right around Pierre. That tends to be kind of a warm spot sometimes. The yellows are more in September, so you see quite a bit of yellow area. That's late September, 24th to 26th, including Aberdeen, where I'm at. It's more on the 24th. So we still have, a little bit of time yet before we see our typical first 32 degree morning or nighttime. If you want to look at the hard frost, or 28 degrees, or a killing frost, as some people call it, depending on your terminology, these are the dates that we often see. That this is, again, the 50th percentile, or the median date. So if you look at all the dates that occur, you kind of go in, and here's the middle, the median date. So occurs a little bit later, maybe about a week later than our 32 degree frost dates do. We're looking more into later September in the Northwest to October. For most of us, October 4th through 9th is the most common period for most of us to see our first killing frost of 28 degrees. So again, depending what plants you're talking about, the number of hours at frost or at these cold temperatures might matter. So again, these data don't take into account how long at that temperature, just when you reach that or not. I think though this year, and I'll show some of the outlook here for the next couple weeks that we get kind of to this time frame. I don't think we're going to see an early frost this year. I know some people have been chattering up north in North Dakota, hinting at maybe some frost or even snow up there. I don't know that we're going to see those very cold temperatures down here in South Dakota, at least not in the next week or two, which then would get us to the typical frost date. So I don't think we're going to see anything in the near future here in frost. I'll get back to the temperatures in a minute, but I did want to start looking at the forecast here, just at what the end of this season will look like. Trying to eke the last few days out, last couple weeks out of our gardens of tomatoes and you know, other squash and zucchinis and whatever you might have out there, pumpkins. It doesn't look to be particularly wet. So I know we've had some areas that were really wet over the last month or so, but here in the next 7 days doesn't look particularly wet. Best chances of precipitation, at least on the east side of the state, is going to be more in the Friday time frame, Thursday to Friday maybe. So, and then again about 6 days away. So, you know, middle of next week again will be the next kind of more active period. So, but really not seeing any really huge amounts of rainfall in the next 7 days. So again, I think good news for us to keep our gardens alive. Might need a little hand watering or irrigation if you are getting on the dry side. I know some areas on the west might be getting a little dry there, but looks like we have a little more life there. Looking at 6 to 10 days out also, so about a week from now, temperatures are going to be pretty warmer than average till then. So average temperatures, average highs this time of year are low to mid 70s, say about 71 to 75 for the high temperatures right now this week. Low temperatures around 45 to 50 this time of year. So looks like we'll see warmer than average temperatures continuing through the week. And then you can see on the left here, that's that map, the national map, where the east side's still hanging on to those warmer temperatures in a week from now. But colder air kind of coming in from the northwest. So again, that northwest corner that tends to have the earlier frost, maybe could see some frost in about a week from now, but that wouldn't be any earlier than average. Looking on precipitation on the right side, it does, again, like I said, about a week from now, about 6 days from now, we start to see a more active weather pattern, especially across the northern tier of South Dakota. And that's indicated on this map here, with, you know, more leaning towards the dry side in the southwest part of the state. So we're kind of splitting the state there, north to south, in about a week from now. 8 to 14 days, looking out there, that's the September 22nd to 28th period. Still on the left, do have some leanings towards warmer than average temperatures, not as confident, not as clear consensus maybe in the climate models, but do see some leaning still towards warmer than average temperatures in the central and east. But then on the right, you see that drier trend again. So returning in that latter part of September, the 22nd to 28th. So again, that kind of active period in about a week from now, I think will last a couple days and then turn dry again for the end of September. I will say the climate outlook, the temperature and precipitation maps for October will be coming out this Thursday. So I don't have that information yet. That hasn't been released yet. So, but looking out further, September through November, kind of, this was issued about a month ago. So it's a little bit stale. But I think we see similar messages when I'm looking at kind of the climate models this morning. Maybe, and oh, these maps are kind of backwards now. So precipitation's on the left in this one. Sorry about that. I do see some hints towards drier conditions than average in the later fall, say November timeframe, and then also leaning warmer than average on the right. That's on the right. So that could be what the latter fall looks like. I know John, I don't think John Ball's on the call today, but I know from his history of working with him, he would encourage those of you, especially in the dry and drought areas, to be watering your trees in the fall to ensure that they're off to a good start in the spring. And we see that with grasses, pasture, and range on the production agriculture side. You know, that fall moisture really sets the stage for our spring, those deep-rooted plants to get off to a good start. So hopefully we can still get some fall moisture to get us off to a good start in the spring with that soil moisture. Looking out towards the winter, kind of taking a peek into the crystal ball a little bit, December through February, taking all 3 of those months put together. What we're looking at for the winter is La Nina conditions setting up, and that's relating to Pacific Ocean sea surface temperatures that can affect atmosphere patterns here over North America. And so that's what we see on the left here. That's a very typical La Nina pattern. It's wetter conditions in the Pacific Northwest and drier all along the southern tier. Up here in South Dakota, it doesn't tell us a whole lot on precipitation. And so that's how we're in the white area. That's equal chances of wetter, drier, or near average for precipitation. Similarly, on the temperature side on the right, doesn't tell us a whole lot on temperature, at least not in the early winter. You see warmer than average along the southern tier, colder in the Pacific Northwest. But as we look further ahead, February, March, April, so that late winter, early spring, that's when we start to see potential for colder temperatures in that late winter season. So when these maps update on Thursday, and you have a chance to go there, go to NOAA CPC, the Climate Prediction Center, I wouldn't be surprised if we continue to see maybe some hints of that colder late winter period, February, March kind of time frame. Again, on the left, on the precipitation side, doesn't tell us a whole lot either way. The one thing that would happen if we do get snow on the ground, if we get this colder late winter, that would keep snow on the ground longer, so that melts a little later, and then hopefully we'll have that moisture in the soil to get our lawns and gardens and everything off to a better start for soil moisture, so we don't lose so much moisture in the spring before we plant. So that's something to keep in mind there. As far as, you know, planting your garden, you know, I don't see any reason now to change your plan or you know, plan on anything particularly early or late going on. So that's still kind of up in the air, I'd say. As far as spring frost, you know, you're looking at the last frost, too early to say anything about that. So just some highlights here for the fall that I wanted to mention. Warmer than average conditions. So I think, you know, given that, we're unlikely to have an early frost. Maybe in the Northwest, we might see about a week from now something of a frost, but that isn't too awfully early for them. That's about average for this for their first frost. Again, minding your water, and I know especially for trees and that kind of thing. Paul Johnson's going to talk next about weeds, so I won't mention that now, but certainly keep your eye on controlling them this fall. And one other kind of climate-related thing or weather-related thing this fall, I know some of us have had a little more rain lately the last few weeks. I know up here in Brown County and Aberdeen, we've got mosquitoes out and about, and I just heard the plane. I think they're spraying for mosquitoes tonight. So we haven't seen mosquito activity like this, but West Nile is active, and there have been 21 cases, I believe, so far in South Dakota that I know of, and at least 8 counties that have mosquitoes of the West Nile species. So certainly be careful and use your bug repellent out there. And then La Nina winter, as I said, tends to favor colder later in the winter, doesn't tell us a lot on precipitation. So that's a little less certain as we look ahead. I wanted to share two more things with you that I think I neglected to mention last time I visited with you in Garden Hour. First is our Mesonet, our network of weather stations across the state. So this was a snapshot I just pulled a little while ago from the Groton station, which is the nearest one to me. The weather data on these weather stations updates every 5 minutes. It includes temperature, which includes heat index and wind chill, depending what season you're at. Precipitation, wind speed and direction, soil moisture, and soil temperature. And in the winter, we also have frost depth as well. So a lot of great information here. And one thing I want to add too is that the Mesonet is planning an expansion with a lot of up to over 100 new stations in South Dakota in the next few years. And if you're interested in hosting a station, if you live on, especially out in some rural property, out on a farm or something like that, or you have a larger acreage, please reach out to us, myself or the Mesonet director, who's Nathan, as they're taking applications now for people who want to host. If you go to the website, mesonet.sdstate.edu, there's a link right at the top in the yellow to learn more about that. And then also one other great thing that I do, and I know a lot of other of you master gardener folks also do, is measure rainfall and snowfall in our backyards. And we have this network called CocoRa's, Community Collaborative Rain, Hail, and Snow Network. Free to participate. You just sign up online on the Join CocoRa's little link there on the website. It's all volunteers, and you just report your rainfall, snowfall each day, every day that you can. So you can use an app on your phone or go through the website on your computer. I'm the state coordinator, and so I do have some rain gauges on hand. If you're interested in signing up, I can send those out to new folks. Or if yours breaks and you're a registered observer, yours breaks or you need new parts or whatever, let me know that too, and I can send you some new gear. So hope you'll consider that too. It's great for record keeping and kind of keeping track of the weather while you're doing your gardening and lawn work. So hope you'll consider that. With that, this is my phone number and email, and I can take any questions, Rhoda, if there are. I see there's, oh, Evan just put the website in the chat. That was for CocoRa's to sign up for the volunteer precipitation measurements. So that's what I have, Rhoda.
Thank you. It sounds like not too bad a stretch ahead. If only we could get some moisture.
Yeah, I know we've caught some rains over the last few weeks. Some areas, they're still dry though. I know we're still in drought for a lot of the state, but hopefully a little bit greener than we were a month ago.
It's always that balance between wanting dry weather for harvest and wet weather for any seeding that's done in the fall.
That's right, exactly. Yeah.
Paul, are you ready to tell us how to control our weeds? I know mine have been, there we are. Okay.
Now, if I get myself unmuted and we'll fire up the camera. And we'll look at some fall weed control. Oh, I didn't get the other one clicked. There we go. Now I went too far. So as we get ready for fall, A lot of you have heard the old adage, we want to wait for that first frost. And I guess we've changed that a little bit in recent years to say, you know, once we're good into September, when we got time, and if the weeds are growing good, maybe it's time to spray for fall. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. Get ready for fall spraying. This is the most common question I get is, well, I got my lawn all cut up now. Can I spray? And the first thing I want to point out is what is going to take in more spray. A short lawn where all the weeds are cut off, so there's no surface area for it to be taken in, or a lawn that's a little bit longer with some growth there. And this would be the minimum size I'd like to see a thistle in this case be at to get that growth. And so this one is a Canada thistle. This one also is. This guy is going to need a couple of weeks. And actually, this person is setting up and is hoping to spray in a couple of weeks. That lawn will be growing out and it'll be in good shape to get this control at that point. And with what Laura is telling us, probably in about 2 weeks, so be fairly close to the time we're going to see that first frost. So if you're getting ready to set up, you know, either cut your lawn quick and wait a couple of weeks, or let that lawn grow out. So you gotta, I'd like to see about 2 weeks of growth anyway before we do that fall spraying. What is this? You know, again, we got her cut off there. This is more like we'd like to see it. And the one thing that fall spraying is guaranteed to be good at is controlling dandelions. And any of the common broadleaf products, Trimec, just straight 2,4-D, is going to do a real good job on dandelions. And so the next year, when everybody is out there trying to spray their dandelions, when they're yellow and they're hard to control, you will be sitting there going, boy, I got that done last fall. I don't have to look at that problem this year. And there's also quite a few other weeds that are controlled well in the fall. Here we have a wild violet. These are very tough to control. We need a product like a Trimec, where it has a 2,4-D, MCPP, and dicamba, or Triclopyr is another lawn spray for broadleaves that really is the top one for wild violet. Here's a plantain. You can see down in the grass, he's kind of been hiding, and now has some new growth coming out there with the rains. And you know, give him another week and he'll be in real good shape for control. Again, this one, the Trimec products probably are as good as there is out there. Other tough ones, ground ivy to me is also really tough. This one, we look at that 3-way mix, and we'd like to spray it once and then wait a couple weeks and come back a second time, and then we should be still in that 90 percentile for control. Other thistles, I have to say this came from my neighbor's lawn, but I've been in my particular house for 40 years and I never let a thistle go to seed. And I still also get a few bull thistles that come up. And apparently the area where I live used to be lot or a feed yard for a farm that was in that territory. And so that seed is probably now close to 60 years old, and we're still getting new bull thistles coming out. So we have to realize that we're not going to clean up a lawn overnight and have it perfect because can be a lot of seed bank down below there that is going to continue to come. But both of these fall weed control is real good on. A couple other things, another real hard one is creeping bellflower. This one is a very pretty plant if it's in a flower garden, but when it's in a lawn, the bellflowers all get cut off and we just have these ugly broadleaf weeds. So if that's something you want to grow in your flower bed as an old time a perennial flower that was used a lot in South Dakota back in the 20s and 30s. This is one, but make sure you keep a barrier between it and the lawn. White clover, again, one that can be controlled good in the fall, but it is one. Some people say, well, they really don't want to control that. They like it. It keeps the lawn nice and green. And yes, the white clover does produce nitrogen. And so it's available to keep the grass growing that way. It's kind of a natural fertilizer. And so if that's what you like to see, you can leave it. But if you want to control it, again, fall is the best time. Field bindweed, as we go further west in the state, really becomes a problem in the lawns, especially in dry years. It's this viney and it gets these nice big white flowers. Again, this one, fall is an excellent time to control, and you can do a very good job. Again, I'd use that three-way mix. Now, the one that's a little bit different, prostrate knotweed. This is a perennial, but if you're going to spray that in the fall, we want to do it early fall, because as we can see in this picture I just took today, the prostrate knotweed really does not grow that well late season, and it's just kind of sitting there, especially when we've had conditions that are drier than normal. It grows best in the hot part of the year, and this is the weed that we often find along our gravel driveways or in real heavy traffic areas. And as I ask anybody, before you decide you want to take this out, is something else going to grow there? Is the grass going to stay in there? Or is there too much traffic or too coarse a soil to grow the grass well? In fact, at the state fair this year, I had a guy come up and want to know where he could get seed for prostrate knotweed, because he'd sure just as soon have his whole lawn that, because he wouldn't have to mow as much. And so everybody has a different view that way, and however you are, that's totally fine. A couple of things that fall spraying may not work on. Yellow wood sorrel is just an annual. It comes whenever we have some moisture. Didn't see this one basically all summer, and now it's coming. And the other thing, when you got some weeds, you don't necessarily know what it is. Here's a couple of them. This is a blue spruce that's started from seed in a lawn and has been cut off several times, and it's still surviving. And here we've got another tree that's coming, and this one I'm fairly certain is going to turn into an ash tree. But these types, fall isn't necessarily the best. In reality, pulling them or removing them with like a dandelion spade may be your best option. if we have one like this, and this is right in front of my office, you just could need to start spraying. As I look through here, I can see at least 6 different weed species that we look at for fall spraying. We got a dandelion over here. We've got some white clover here. We've got some plantain here. Here, I think this might turn into a ragweed. We've got some wild violet in here. And so just a host of things. I think there is, let me see, here's prostrate knotweed, and I believe there's some chickweed down in this corner. So probably won't get them all, but fall is a good time to get a good start to make sure that the weeds aren't outnumbering the grass plants in a lawn. And so with that, that's kind of what I see for fall weed control. Here's my contact information. If you got any questions, I'll be glad to answer them at this time.
I'm not seeing any questions in the chat or Q&A. A reminder to our listeners that you can type in questions at any point, and we'll keep an eye on them and get back to Paul if you have some ones that you've been struggling with. I know it's several of those that you talked about tonight. I've had questions in the last week or two. So, but I think you gave us some pretty good information on that. Now we get to look, instead of at weeds, something very beautiful. And Christine's going to take us over to McCrory Gardens.
Hi, everybody. Yes, I kind of, as I say every week, I had a really hard time narrowing down which ones I wanted to share with you today, but the gardens are still looking really fabulous and there's lots of fun things going on. So I'm going to switch over to my screen here. Let's see here. I'm going to share my screen and start my presentation. So start. All right, so some things going on. We do have the party on the porch going on again this Sunday and the next Sunday, with just some nice bands playing, so you can enjoy music and also enjoy walking around the gardens and have some food. And there's a cash bar and just a wonderful kind of relaxing day in the gardens, which sounds really great to me. So this week, I think it's Plum Crazy that's going to be playing. And then on the 26th, it's Kyle Knutson who's going to be playing. So just some things to watch for. And then upcoming really soon here, the fall, they're calling it the Fall Frolic Tour. So they're just going to do a free tour of the gardens to go kind of see what's blooming, what's out in the gardens. And that'll be September 16th. So this Thursday at 10 a.m. So watch out for that as well. And then some things I didn't put on the slide here, but just to kind of save the date, is in October. We have Fall Festival, October 10th, with a good friend of mine is going to be doing a really amazing fall floral arranging class that I think they'll be posting pretty soon. So keep your eyes peeled for that one. And then the Haunted Trail, which is kind of the fun collaboration with the theater department, is going to be doing like a scary trail through the gardens on the 29th and 30th. Giggles and Ghouls, that's where you get your kids all dressed up and come trick or treat at the gardens, and the 31st. So just keep posted. We have lots of fun things coming to get an opportunity to see the things I'm going to show you. So what's in bloom? So much, but a few that I wanted to share. I chose this Sedum Matrona, this stone crop. It is just covered in bees right now, so it's really, really lovely. A nice kind of fall color and pollinator plant that I really enjoy, and I encourage you all to plant. It also is pretty drought tolerant. It's just a really nice plant in sunny locations. Let's see, here we go. Korean feather reed grass. So kind of, I don't know about everybody, but it feels like everybody has seen the Carl Forster feather reed grass, which is that super common grass that you'll see in a lot of commercial or, or home landscapes. It's a wonderful grass. So it's not really a question why people have it. It's just pretty common. It's just a straight up, kind of stands really erect, stands very well. It doesn't really bend over in, wind or snow or anything. So it's a great kind of clump forming grass that doesn't spread. It has more of a tan brown seed head. It's just a different look than this is another Calamagrostis, the Brachytricha, the Korean feather reed grass, which I really enjoy. It's a little bit different. It blooms, it blooms. Well, I guess those seed heads a little bit later, but gosh, it's got this kind of soft, frothy look to it that I really enjoy. And it still is that nice clump forming grass. And that is looking really fabulous in the garden right now in our grass collection. So I'm going to show you a few grasses right now because they're looking stunning right now. And then there's also around like the Nelsibus and Hansen, Hansen garden, and the oh my gosh, the Rosenfield garden. They have a lot of this grass growing around it if you want to see it in person. Miscanthus sinensis gold silver is like a red silver. It's a German word for red silver grass. It is so beautiful. And that's my little girl, Lan. I tossed her in the photo to get a little bit of a size scale. And so she was having fun running around the garden with me. I was like, hey, now you can kind of see how big this is. It's a tall grass. It's clump forming. It doesn't spread as vigorously as like a Chinese, just the straight Miscanthus sinensis, Chinese silver grass. That's pretty common, more silvery, fluffy looking. But this one is wonderful. It has these like pinkish shades, and it's behind the visitor center there, as well as in the grass collection, which is where we see it here. And I love it. It works really great to cut and put in containers too. I really don't have anything bad to say about that grass. Another one that I love is this Chesmanthium latifolium northern sea oats. This one has a tiny thing that it doesn't always come back consistently over the winter, but if you find a good pocket for it, which we've kind of found a good pocket in the garden where it likes to return year after year, then you're set. It is so lovely. It's just these seed heads kind of just rustle and kind of make this pretty noise in the wind, and it kind of turns pinkish red into the fall. So, and that's another one that looks really nice if you like cutting your flowers or grasses or foliage and bringing it into your home. So that's one that I would look for and recommend, because it is very, very lovely. This one, look at this plant. This is the bottle gentiana andrewsii. So this is in the Centennial Prairie Garden. So if you're familiar with McCrory Gardens a little bit, kind of by the Cottage Garden, there's a little bit of a prairie, it's called a Prairie Centennial Garden. That's supposed to kind of demonstrate some plant native habitats of South Dakota, including some prairie flowers and things like that. And this is one of them, and it is fantastic right now. So definitely go look for this little gem in the garden and try to plant them yourselves. We have a few on the farm where I live on the prairie, and they're a little bit shorter than this, but boy, it's a treat when you find them. So it's wonderful to see. You can plant them in your own garden at home. Another one, so I'm going to cover a couple annual flowers too that we just plant every year that are really favorites of mine. This one's the Salvia farinaceae, the blue bedder, mealy kept sage. So it's a little bit different. This annual, we always get these new exciting annuals that we get very I don't know, again, excited about and different cultivars, different colors, but this has been one that's, for years, I just love its texture and color in the garden. I just like its little bit different look, a little bit different texture and color that just complements, I feel like, a lot of garden beds. And then again, I threw little Laney in for a little bit of a size gauge. It gets pretty tall, so it can be a nice kind of backdrop to annual beds or mixed into a container and things like that. So that's another favorite annual plant of mine. And this is in the vegetable garden. So Lab. It's just I didn't really get a beautiful photo of the flowers, but they got these pretty purple pea-like flowers, and then those Lab beans on them too. So that's kind of it's got kind of purplish leaves and a cool vine if you're looking for vines. And I'm not sure if I have one more. I think this is my last one. I might have one more. I just think that's the neatest looking, funkiest flower that I like. Funky things. That's like, what is that? That's a unique, beautiful thing. So this is they call it an artichoke thistle, Cynara cardunculus. I should have thrown Laney in there for a size gauge again, because that plant is almost as tall as her. That one, the photo, if you can see in the middle, is kind of the whole plant. And I just, love the kind of purple spiky ness to this blossom, and just, I don't know how to describe that plant besides it's a cool plant that we grow. We do sort of a mock freeze for this one. So we grow it, and it's a biennial. So we'll grow it, and then from seed, and then we stick it in the cooler for about a month. I think we stick it in the cooler and then put it back out, and there we have our blossoms. So yep, that was the last one. So again, there's so much to see out there. I hope you guys get the opportunity to go check it out, see some lovely things, and even just trees, the crab apples are putting on their fruit, and the high bush cranberries and things like that. So definitely go enjoy the gardens in this beautiful weather. So that's all I have. Thank you for having me, unless you guys have any questions.
Thank you, Christina. There's
Oh, how tall is Laney? Oh my gosh, that's a question that I should know.
or what age is she?
She's about 3 foot. She's about 3 foot tall. So
we get the pleasure of seeing your beautiful daughter along with all the beautiful flowers.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure she's like 49 inches, because I know she was tall enough to like ride rides. So yeah. All right. So thank you guys for having me.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. I will stop my share here so you can share your screen here.
Yeah.
If I can. There we go.
And I can just see Paul's itching to spray that thistle in McCrory Gardens.
It is a little thistle looking, but it's, we also have globe thistle, which is kind of thistle looking, but they're so pretty. We hope you find peace with some thistles. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. All right, and I'm going to talk about some not quite so pretty things. This was a picture I took in 2019 of a tree here in Rapid that looked pretty tough. It had gotten a lot of fire blight throughout the tree. And, we look for the typical symptoms, the little bit of a shepherd's crook at the end, and typical firing of the leaves that just kind of looked maybe a little scorched. And these are typical of fire blight. And when it's throughout the tree like this, very often it has started in a blossom. The bees visited and got some of the bacteria on themselves and brought it to the next blossom. I looked at this tree about a week ago, and it had a few strikes on, but not very many at all. So this tree actually has some pretty good resistance to fire blight. Even though we saw it pretty bad here, it was able to overcome that and still keep growing. So I'm going to show you in a second a list of cultivars that we often recommend for resistance. But the other thing I wanted to talk about a little bit first was generally, well, when you get like this, it's pretty hard to trim all those out. But if you just have a couple branches like this tree up here, and you want to trim that out, there's a rule of thumb that's a little different than what we've sometimes preached in the past. If this twig is less than 2 years old, go ahead and cut it off. Make sure that you go down from where you see the last symptoms. You want to go down anywhere from 8 to 12 inches. You can scrape away the bark a little bit, and if you see some discoloration or some sort of olive color instead of bright green, that's a sign of the bacteria. So you need to go down deeper, and you need to follow the usual instructions about cleaning your tools in between. It's best if you're using a bleach solution to have the tool in the bleach for a minute or two if you can between cuts. However, if you're on a little larger branch and you need to take out a branch where you can tell it's more than 2 years old, what we recommend during the summer when you're doing that now is to leave a stub. Remember, we never like to see stubs when we're pruning trees. This is the exception to that. If you're trimming fire blight in a branch during the summer, go ahead and cut it out and cut out that fire blight, but leave the stump. Unless it's, of course, got the fire blight all the way down to the next branch. But leave that stub. That stub, the older tissue in the tree often has a little bit more resistance. So you've got that cut surface, and fire blight can get back into that because it's not protected, but the older wood will help decrease the growth of that. So then you come back next spring during your regular pruning time and look for those stubs, and then make the proper cut all the way back to the collar at that point. The other thing I'll just mention, I don't think we're going to get down to those temperatures anytime soon, but fire blight is not active at temperatures below 40 degrees. So if you want to do your spring pruning, while it's still pretty cold, but above freezing, as long as it's 40 degrees, you don't have to worry about all the bleach and disinfecting tools. So keep that in mind. These are a number of the varieties that we recommend, and you saw this last week. We talked about it for scab. This week, I want you to pay attention to the fire blight. Freedom has the strongest resistance to fire blight of any of our trees. It's a less common variety, but it's very disease resistance. Same with Liberty. So those are two to really consider if you've seen a lot of fire blight or these other diseases. Harrelson and Honeycrisp are two varieties from Minnesota that also have pretty good resistance. Snow Sweet is a newer one from Minnesota, also has pretty good resistance. So Minnesota has paid attention to this in their breeding program and usually doesn't release a variety unless it has some resistance. And chestnut crab is an older one, a crab apple that also has pretty good resistance. So look for that if you've had problems, especially if you've had to take out a tree for fire blight. That's very discouraging. So two other apple problems I wanted to mention a little bit. we usually get pictures of something like this every year where you have kind of a water soaked appearance. When you cut open the apple, it looks fine from the outside. You cut it open and you kind of see this. Actually, that's very concentrated sugar water on the inside of it. So it's very sweet. It would probably make great juice. And it's perfectly edible. There's nothing wrong. It just means that the apple got a little bit overripe. It should have been picked a little earlier. So nothing wrong with it, but this apple won't keep very long either. So eat it right away or cut it up and use it for freezing or in some sort of cooking. The other thing that we often see is these dark spots on the outside. And if you look at them, they're not, with the exception of these two, which are something else, they don't penetrate the peel very far. In fact, you could take a cloth and you can actually wipe them off. We call that sooty mold, and it's like soot on the outside of the apple. And that's pretty much what it is. It is mold, it's a fungus, but it's not actually feeding on the apple skin itself. It's feeding on the dust, or if you've had aphids and they're dripping their real sugary droppings onto the fruit, the mold comes along and grows on that. So again, totally harmless, won't affect your storage life. It just looks a little disconcerting, but you can just wipe it off and you're good to go. The other disease problem I wanted to talk about a little bit that we see fairly often in South Dakota on some varieties of grapes is black rot. And some distinguishing features of black rot are these lesions on the leaves that have a dark border and lighter inside. They're pretty distinctive for black rot. So that's one of the things that I always look for when I'm trying to diagnose what's wrong with grapes. When you just get a bunch of grapes like this, sometimes there's about 3 or 4 different things from Phomopsis, anthracnose, and in fact we might even have a little anthracnose or some insect feeding there, so you can get more than one thing at a time too. But I look for the leaves and say, that's black rot. The other thing that is very characteristic of black rot that helps us diagnose is, you can see on this photo a little bit better, the grapes just shrivel up and stay on the stem, and they'll stay over winter even. You don't want to leave them over winter because the fungus has entered into that berry, taken it over, and is busy producing spores for next year. And this is the prime spore source for infections for next year. So if you see this on your vines, be sure at some point during the winter, preferably earlier in the winter, you go in and you cut that out and you remove them from the area. So that's one of our best ways to combat this problem is just plain sanitation. You'll see these same lesions sometimes on the stems or the canes. And in these photos, we really don't see that. But if you do see those lesions, that's something that you want to try to remove when you're doing pruning. You can spray for black rot, and if you've had a problem year after year, that's probably a good idea. The best one for homeowners is probably mycobutanil. Sometimes under the trade name Immunox, but it's a fungicide that is particularly effective for this. And you want to spray it, just has those buds break in the spring, and then every 2 weeks until you're past the sort of rainy, wet season, or until the grapes start to turn color, and at that point they become more resistant to it. So So that's an option. Captan is a fungicide that's readily available to homeowners. Unfortunately, Captan and or copper sprays, which are another control, aren't all that effective for black rot. So if you can get the myclobutanil, that's one of the more effective ones. So those are some options, but again, make sure that you're doing good cleanup and then good pruning, so you've got good air movement throughout the vine. Again, and I've got some information at this URL that's across the bottom here. Whoops. Again, resistance is an option if you're selecting grapes. Marquette is a release from Minnesota, a very cold hardy grape that has pretty high resistance to black rot. You're not likely to see black rot on Marquette, or at least not very much. Valiant, which is our sort of homeowner's grape that was released here in South Dakota, has some pretty good resistance to it as well. Itasca is one of the newer grapes from Minnesota. It's their most recent release. A wine grape, very cold hardy, also has about the same kind of resistance as Valiant, so some pretty good resistance. Couple of the others that are very popular in South Dakota are fairly susceptible. Frontenac and Brianna, which is my favorite little white wine grape, and La Crescent is very susceptible. So if you've seen this around and you're thinking about getting a second variety of grapes, or you're replacing grapes, look for resistance for that. And you can always go to our website, extension.sdstate.edu, and then up in the search box, just type in black rot or type in grapes, and it'll give you some options there to look for this information. And thank you for putting those URLs into the box for me. I'll turn to some questions, and before I do that, I should go ahead and just call attention to this hotline. If you don't get your questions answered yet today, you have the option of emailing or calling any of the 3 regional centers listed here. We have people that work with gardeners, and if they don't know the question, they'll forward them on to us. So you can either contact them, or you can save it for next week, and we love to have it next week as well. Or you can email us and we may just put it on next week. You can send pictures to any of these centers as well as emailing as well. So lots of options for that. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen. Can we plant another apple tree in the same general areas? Do bacterial spores stay in the soil? No, you're okay as far as fire blight. Although I would consider looking for one of those more blight resistant trees, because we know that in your neighborhood, there's a source for that fire blight. So so you know it's in the air around you somewhere. And Paul, we have one for you about can you spray where you've just overplanted grass seed this fall?
Yeah, in that case, no, we would not want to see any spraying. Normally when we plant new grass, we do not want to see any spraying on it for a year. Also remember, next spring, you're going to still have grass coming on, and do not use crabgrass killer in those areas, because any new germinating grass will also be controlled. buy that crabgrass killer, and so you won't have the new grass there. So again, no spraying first year after. I guess if I'm going to put a recommendation, it's a little late now, but if you do have heavy weeds on an area, especially perennial weeds, I would look at spraying ahead of time, let those weeds grow up, spray them out, and then 36 hours after you spray them out, you can come back and plant your grass.
And Evan just reminded me that we were going to have a poll for you guys tonight to get a little bit of feedback from you. So Evan, if you can put up that poll for us. So you can click on all that apply. We're just curious about how our listeners, what kinds of things our listeners use for growing in the gardens. And panelists, I'm sorry, you can't vote.
But out of curiosity, panelists, what do you use?
Oh, out of those, I have had a raised bed, but I don't have one anymore. I do containers, mostly for potatoes. I have like the felt bags you grow potatoes in, also flowers, and then I don't do the rest of those either. I just garden out in the out in the soil, out in the garden. So I do have a no-till garden though, however. So
Yeah.
there are some challenges with that, with insects at times, especially. But I do find it's easier to control weeds in a lot of ways. So I do that.
And that's an option I didn't think about putting up, but we could do a whole nother one with cover crops. And I do some containers. I keep thinking I want to make a raised bed, but I haven't yet. That's always on my to-do list and never quite get to it. I have used row covers for insect protection in the past. Again, many of the master gardeners have heard my story of realizing bean beetles come over winter in the soil. So I just kind of made a nice little tent for them to live in when I have to get the row cover where they aren't to start with. And Evan, can we see the results of that, or have we gotten?
Well, I was just like waiting on it, but it's been 2 minutes. You're right. I'll just end it. There was one straggler who answered like near the 2-minute mark.
Oh, okay. Thanks, everyone. All right. No row covers, huh? We're going to have to talk about that a little bit more and maybe get you some examples. And we do have a greenhouse or high tunnel. Thanks, everyone. And I want to extend a special thank you.
We have a second poll, remember? You asked me to
okay.
questions.
That's right.
That up real quick. I'm sorry we're going over time. Like, we can do this next time if you want. I just thought I'd throw it out there.
Well, as long as people are used to polling now, let's just go ahead and see what we get.
All right, I'll pull it up right now then. It's a real simple one, so, I'll just keep it up for a minute.
Do you use insecticides in your yard or garden? And it might be organic or it might be regular conventional. Just wondering. Amanda had asked us to put this one up, so.
That's one thing about frost temperatures, since we're on the topic of insects, like grasshoppers, and a lot of those insects won't die until we have a hard frost. So that's the downside of having a later a later frost, if that happens to be the case this year.
That's true.
I gotta say, this was a really engaging topic for the audience. Like, first 15 minutes, most of the people had responded. Just given that last person. We got 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Here are our results.
Interesting. Kind of an even split there. All right. Thank you, everyone, for participating tonight. And maybe we'll have some more polls in the next couple of weeks. We only have 2 more shows left. So I want to extend a special welcome, a special thank you tonight to Paul and to Laura for being willing to give up some of their evening for the benefit of us. And want to thank you, the audience, for joining with us and extending your questions. And we hope to see you next week.